For many years, I didn't talk about the child because I didn't want people to think I was childish. And I wouldn't talk about the child. And I wouldn't talk about the equation because I was afraid to talk about the equation. I was raised a little Jewish boy, and I was told that there were secrets, and one didn't betray the secrets. One didn't talk about God because one didn't know anything about the ineffable. And I had to, when I thought about back over long life, I remember Buddha wouldn't talk about God either. He said, I don't know anything about God, so I won't talk about God. But you can ask me other questions. And if you remember, the old rabbis of old wouldn't even write the word God. They would leave it blank. And so it was that I thought that I shouldn't talk about the equation, and I shouldn't talk about the child. And of course, I can't talk about God. I was raised a little Jewish boy, but my mother was a Christian Zionist. I couldn't go to temple because they said his mother is a Christian Zionist and doesn't believe in medicine and doesn't go to doctors. And I didn't belong to the Christian community because they said he's a Christian Zionist. And I remember my first time to go to school, my first day at school, I was greeted by a hailstone of rocks. People throwing rocks at me, yelling, "Jew, go home. Jew, go home." So I know what it's like to grow up without a community at all, without a Christian community or a Jewish one. Now, when I was 7 years old, I was attending church. I guess I was 8 years old. When all of a sudden a man had an epileptic seizure and screamed bloody murder. And he fell out of his seat screaming. Now that sort of thing doesn't happen at a Christian Science church. You don't dare do that because God is all. Because God is good. And there isn't any life, truth, intelligence, or substance in matter. But the man fell out of the seat anyway, and he screamed anyway, and nobody did anything. Now, I was way over on one side of the church up front because Mom believed in sitting up front. Let the visitors sit in the back. And this man screamed, and I knew that you weren't supposed to interrupt such a holy thing as readers reading from the Bible and the science of health with key to the scriptures. You want me to say it, don't you? By Mary Baker Eddy. But he kept screaming, and nobody did anything. And I broke away from my mother, and I ran all the way across the front of the church and down the aisle to where this tall, big, huge man was screaming. And I just knew that he shouldn't be there and that somebody should be helping him. And I started tugging toward the vestibule. I looked up and saw that everybody was knowing the truth. Everybody was pinching their nose and knowing the truth. Well, I started dragging him down the aisle. It was to have a beautiful carpet like this. It was this, wood floor. And there were wooden pews. And a little elderly lady stood up and she helped me. So it was she and I dragging the man to the rear of the church. In the vestibule, a doctor who was in attendance, who had never been allowed to join the church because he was a medical doctor, came to the man's rescue and told me, "Billy, you can go outside if you like. You shouldn't be in here now." And I went outside and I sat in the privet hedge and I said to myself, if God is all, if God is everywhere and everything, and if God is good, in which there is nothing that worketh or maketh a lie. I was a smart little 8-year-old. Then, why is this man screaming? And why doesn't somebody help him? And I was resolved at 8 years old to find out why life is what life is. and how it's like it is. And so that was how it began. Then I was sent to a military school. I complained about having too many sisters and not enough brothers. And I was sent to a military school in Mississippi. And they used a hazing system. And I can't tell you how many brooms have been broken over my 14-year-old butt. And how many paddles have been whacked against my 14-year-old butt. And coat hangers wrapped around it. But I was still determined to know if God is good, why is all this going on? I made a discovery at that military school, and that was if I pretended to be studying, they wouldn't haze me. So I pretended to study like crazy my whole first year until I wasn't a plebe anymore. I no sooner got out of military school than I went to China, second lieutenant of infantry. I was much too young to be a second lieutenant of infantry. I was only 18 years old. The Army didn't know what to do with it.